and we begin with this important warning from President Trump. Less than 2 years ago, he predicted accurately that Joe Biden's economic policies would, quote, unleash an economic disaster of epic proportions. Well, here we are. Record high gas prices, meaning the highest ever. Anemic growth. Historic levels of inflation, a 40-year high. In October, inflation was 6%. When Joe became president, by the way, he inherited 1.4%. Anyway, in November, it was even higher. In December, even higher at 7% for the first time in decades. And in January, a 40-year high at 7.5%. Now the February numbers came out just today, and now we're at a whopping 7.9%. And it actually would be a lot worse if you calculate inflation like the federal government did under Jimmy Carter before 1980. Well, if you calculated using the old method, it would be over 16%. Either way, all of this inflation was recorded well before Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine, before February 24th. But according to Joe Biden and Jen Psaki, they now have one thing that they can blame on everything. Oh, Vladimir Putin. It's all Vladimir Putin's fault. High gas prices, Vladimir Putin. Today's inflation report, Vladimir Putin. Now, this report today is a reminder that Americans' budgets are being stretched by price increases, and families are starting to feel the real impact of Putin's price hike. Now, today, Psaki doubled down on Biden's big lie and added an additional culprit: greedy oil companies. Let's blame them. Take a look.
You may have noticed this week that your gas prices have gone up. I want to talk to you a little bit about why. A lot of it has to do with Vladimir Putin. But part of this is on the oil companies. Right now, there are 9,000 approved unused permits that oil and gas companies could tap into now to ramp up production. The only way to protect the United States over the long term is to become energy independent. That's why the president has been so focused on investing in clean energy technologies, so that we can rely on that and not President Putin to set the price of gas.
Well, obviously, Jen Psaki is now auditioning for fake news CNN or MSDNC. She'll fit in perfectly if she keeps telling lies like that. You need to stop lying. This idea that Putin caused last year's oil and gas spike is a lie. They need to stop lying that Putin caused Joe's 40-year high in inflation. We had that 40-year high before Ukraine was invaded by Russia. The most recent numbers from last month: Russia invaded Ukraine February 24th. As former Obama advisor Stephen Ratner points out, quote, these are February's numbers and only include a small Russia effect, 4 days worth. This is Biden's inflation. He needs to own it. But that's never going to happen. The new Green Deal socialist in his own, party's climate alarmist cult, as I call it, they want more spending. They want zero domestic production of fossil fuels. They own Joe Biden. They own Jen Psaki, the propagandist. They own Kamala Harris, the embarrassment. And Joey campaigned on all of these insane policies. You might remember he told you he would do every bit of this.
If we don't start using fossil fuels,
we're all dead. Doing away with any subsidies for fossil fuels, number one. Number two, holding them liable for what they have done, particularly in those cases where you're underserved neighborhoods and you know the deal, okay? And by the way, when they don't or when they're deliberate, we put them in jail.
Kiddo, I want you to just take a look, okay? You don't have to agree, but I want you to look in my eyes. I guarantee you, we're going to end fossil fuel, and I am not going to cooperate with it, okay?
Would there be any place for fossil fuels, including coal and fracking, in a Biden administration?
No, we would work it out. We would make sure it's eliminated.
All right. This has always been their goal. This is their policy. That was their promise. Their promise is now being fulfilled. They know their energy restrictions and rampant spending are causing gas prices to spike. They know it's causing a 40-year high of inflation. They know that the average American family is hurting because of these policies, but they don't care. They care more about their radical new Green Deal socialist agenda. Now, listen to this clip from Biden's energy secretary. She made these comments in November as gas prices were rising then. Take a listen.
What is the Granholm plan to increase oil production in America?
Oh my God, that is hilarious. Would that I had the magic wand on this. As you know, of course, oil is a global market. It is controlled by a cartel. That cartel is called OPEC, and they made a decision yesterday that they were not going to increase beyond what they were already planning.
Now, that was in November. At the time, gas prices, they were rising dramatically. Jennifer Granholm thinks it's funny, didn't care, did nothing to increase domestic production because that goes against their stated policy. Look at this new Trafalgar poll by our friend Robert Cahaly. With Russian oil banned from our country, a vast majority of Americans, nearly 80%, they want this country to increase our own oil and energy production. But again, the Biden administration doesn't care. They're full of excuses, and the American people are left holding the bag. You're paying more at the gas pump. You're paying more to heat and cool your home. You're paying more for every product you buy at every store that you go to. And that's okay with them. They care more about their new Green Deal socialist friends that obviously have more influence than the American people. So let's face it, they are not up to the job economically. And this is hurting our national security on top of everything else, because now they're willing to go, beg Maduro in Venezuela and go to the Iranian mullahs and import oil from Iran and beg OPEC that keeps rejecting Joe Biden every time he asks them to increase production. Everyone knows Joe Biden is weak. He is a cognitive mess, and they know that they can do pretty much anything they want. Now, Joe is either unwilling or unable to travel abroad, so he always sends Kamala Harris in his place, and it just never goes well. She's obviously in way, way, way over her head. For example, this week, the vice president in Poland earlier today, she doesn't really seem to have any grasp on much of anything. It's pretty humiliating for the country. Take a look. You decide.
I am here, standing here on the northern flank, on the eastern flank, talking about what we have in terms of the eastern flank and our NATO allies. I want to be very clear. The United States and Poland are united in what we have done and are prepared to do to help Ukraine and the people of Ukraine. Full stop. We all watched the television coverage of just yesterday. That's on top of everything else that we know and don't know yet, based on what we've just been able to see. And because we've seen it or not doesn't mean it hasn't happened. But just limited to what we have seen.
Following those remarks, Trump's acting DNI, Rick Grinnell, a friend of this program, tweeted, quote, "Oh, dear God, this is a total disaster. She is not prepared. She isn't grasping issues and solutions, and she rambles. I blame the Sacramento media for never properly vetting her. But believe it or not, it actually got worse. At one point, the Vice President Harris, responded to a very serious question about refugees with one of her world-famous laughing fits. That's right, the Vice President giggling before the world when asked about what do we do with war refugees. Watch yourself.
Is the United States willing to make a specific allocation for Ukrainian refugees? And for President Duda, I wanted to know if you think, and if you asked the United States to specifically accept more refugees.
Okay. A friend in need is a friend indeed.
Okay, I can first. Okay, so this time.
The war in Ukraine, let's see, they're bombing maternity hospitals. They're leveling entire neighborhoods. We have mass graves with 70 people in it. A humanitarian crisis in Eastern Europe is very serious. What are we going to do with the refugees? The stakes couldn't be higher, and Europe is on the edge of a potential world war that's got to be avoided. And Kamala's yucking it up, laughing it up, and giggling without any ability to answer a simple, basic question. She never gave an honest answer to that question. Americans here at home, abroad, everybody, the world deserves better. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.